Over the last few years, the social and political landscapes in the United States have shifted significantly. Working class people all over the country are publicly making their stances known on pressing regional, national, and global issues. The growth of mass movements and protests in the streets in cities all over the country is the manifestation of this rise of consciousness amongst the masses. One of the most polarizing and well-known movements in recent memory is the Black Lives Matter movement, whose main objectives were criminal justice reform, ending police brutality, and stopping racist policing practices in black communities. The other movement that has galvanized activists and gained national attention is the immigrant rights movement. From DACA to TPS, there are a myriad of issues that have caused workers in the immigrant community and their allies to rise up out of the shadows to fight against oppression and for full rights as U.S. citizens. For the past few months, deportations and family separations at the U.S.-Mexico border have dominated headlines and news cycles. ICE agents are literally snatching children from their parents' arms, and parents are forced to watch their children be taken away from them with no remorse. These children are being held in cages under inhumane conditions that no human should have to endure, especially children. Infants as young as 53 weeks old who have been taken away from their parents are being forced to face a judge alone to find out if they'll be deported with their families or not. This is not an isolated incident either. Over 2,000 children have been taken from their families or from their parents over the span of 6 weeks. This isn't a new policy implemented by the Trump administration either. According to Reuters, in 1985, a case was brought against the federal government on behalf of 15-year-old Jenny L. Flores. Flores had fled her country's civil war in El Salvador. And before she was arrested in Southern California. Flores was held at a detention facility in Pasadena, California for 2 months, where she was forced to be around adult strangers and was subjected to regular strip searches. About a year before Flores' arrest, Harold Dizelle, the regional INS commissioner, had toughened the regulations regarding releasing minors so that they could only be referred to parents or only be released to parents or legal guardians. This resulted in children being detained for lengthy periods of time, and because of Flores' lawsuit, though, a settlement was reached in 1997 that set standards for humane treatment of children in detention and ordered their prompt release in most cases. However, child removal is a central facet of most of the U.S.'s colonial and racist policies dating back hundreds of years. As the struggles of the Black Lives Matter and immigrant rights movements have continued forward, there has been some discord regarding each movement's own concerns and objectives. As someone who was once a member of the Black Lives Matter network, I can only speak about what I've heard from my fellow organizers and friends. When the immigration question is raised, there's a good chance that you'll hear that immigration problem doesn't concern us, or Mexicans can be just as racist as white people. Why should we do anything for them? I could go on and on. However, all of these reasons for why black people should not stand in solidarity with our Latinx brothers and sisters are just not good enough. When lives are at stake, especially the lives of children, there needs to be an urgency to stop this practice regardless of who you are. If not for the simple fact that the ruling class has been separating black families since 1619, when the first slaves set foot in America in Jamestown, Virginia, we should stand in solidarity with the undocumented community because there are black immigrants too. According to the Pew Research Center, there are 4.2 million black immigrants living in the United States. The majority of them came from Jamaica, Haiti, and Nigeria. And of those 4.2 million black immigrants, an estimated 619,000 are undocumented as of 2015. With the Trump administration's intensified attacks against the immigrant community, undocumented people are living in fear like never before. ICE raids are taking place around the clock all over the country, uprooting families and throwing them in prisons where they are subjected to demeaning treatment by ICE agents and placed in wretched conditions. ICE raids aren't the only tactic being used by the Trump administration either. Back in January, Donald Trump ended TPS for 4 countries: El Salvador, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Sudan. These were the same countries that Donald Trump called shithole countries. Temporary protected status, or TPS, is granted by the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to eligible foreign-born individuals who are unable to return home safely, whether through natural disaster or other reasons. Now, when Trump ended TPS, it affected more than 250,000 people from 2 countries alone. In 2010, Haiti was devastated by an earthquake that the country has still not fully recovered from 8 years later. El Salvador endured years of civil war and a devastating earthquake of their own in 2001. Over 260,000 people from those 2 countries are being forced to leave their lives that they've built in the U.S. or face deportation within the next year. Most, if not all, of these people lost everything that they had and had to rebuild their lives from scratch in the U.S. They have nothing to return to in their home countries. Only a few short months before the Trump administration brought an end to TPS, it also brought an end to DACA. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals protects undocumented people who came to the U.S. with their parents when they were children. But in order to be eligible for DACA, you must either be a college student or fully employed. While this offers a measure of protection and stability for its recipients, it still denies the rights and privileges of full citizenship. For example, college students who are protected under DACA are not eligible for federal financial aid to cover their tuition costs. Furthermore, changes in their education status or employment may render them deportable. The end of DACA signals the end of protection for approximately 800,000 people, of whom 11,000 are black. The recent attacks against our undocumented brothers and sisters affect the black community greatly, and there needs to be a heightened sense of urgency when it comes to the defense of these communities. Immigration is a black issue. Over the last few decades, being undocumented has become increasingly criminalized. Although it may seem like the surge in the number of ICE raids and other events are sudden, the fact is that this is only the most recent part of a long history of racist immigration laws that date back as far as the 19th century with the Chinese Exclusion Act back in 1882. With the fear-mongering tactics of the current administration being spread with the help of mainstream media, undocumented people are perceived as terrifying criminals or for the reason for all the country's problems. Undocumented people are now the targets of the same tired stereotypes that have been deployed against every minority in the history of this country. They are stealing our jobs, or most infamously told by our president, they are in many cases criminals, drug dealers, rapists, etc. This rhetoric should alarm the black community because the same lies were said about us by the Nixon, Reagan, and Clinton administrations, which led to mass incarceration that has devastated black families to this day. From the end of the civil rights movement to the mid-90s, presidential candidates called themselves tough on crime. And during the last presidential campaign, Donald Trump even called himself the law and order candidate. This is dog whistle language in order to secure the votes of racists in the South who are concerned with the so-called Negro problem. And these dog whistle politics have had nothing but negative effects on the black community. Being tough on crime has always been a useful platform for politicians. However, when these administrations pass laws that on the surface seem colorblind, in reality they're targeted at black neighborhoods, since crime and criminal have been racially coded as black. Because of that, 1 in 3 black men can expect to see the inside of a jail cell at some point in their lifetime. This same dog whistle language is being used against the Latino community and undocumented community. ICE raids are being held in Latinx communities all over the country in hopes of finding and deporting people without papers. The ruling class used the same tactic of over-policing black neighborhoods, looking for and expecting to find people who may be breaking the law. It was this dog whistle language coupled with an abuse of power that led to the Black Lives Matter movement. A nation is defined as a large group of people united by a common descent, history, culture, or language inhabiting a particular country or territory. By this definition, Black people in the United States are a nation within a nation. We share the same history, country, language, and culture. However, because of the transatlantic slave trade and the long history of unabashed violence, institutional racism, and discrimination, we are a landless nation. However, all nations have the right to self-determination, and Black people have exercised this right every single day we have been on American soil. Black people have resisted in a number of ways, from the time of slavery to the current time of mass incarceration. On October 27, 1841, a ship called the Creole set sail with 135 slaves headed to New Orleans. During the trip, 14 men unshackled themselves, waited for the right time to attack, and overcame the captain and crew. Madison Washington, the leader of the attack, then commandeered the ship into British waters where slavery had been abolished, and they were then escorted to Nassau, New Providence, and set free. This is just one example of many of Black people rising up and taking our freedom from our oppressors. And since the attacks against us have been continuous, so has our struggle. As a society, we tend to blame individuals rather than the system. When someone is deported, the first thing someone says is, why didn't they come here legally? Or we have laws for a reason. But those are the wrong questions that should be asked. The real question is, why would someone decide to uproot their life and start over in a country where they don't speak the language and where they know where they're not wanted? The real answer for that is U.S. imperialism. The scientific socialist definition of imperialism is defined as the highest stage of capitalism. It's when the concentration of production and capital has developed at such a high stage that it has created monopolies which play a decisive role in economic life. This leads to the territorial division of the world amongst the world's most world's most strongest capitalists. Every country that I've mentioned so far has been affected by U.S. imperialism, militarily or economically, which has forced large numbers of people to come here, whether legally or otherwise. In 1994, the Clinton administration proposed the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, to Mexico. NAFTA was presented to Mexico as a beneficial deal for their economy. It was meant to increase the development of the country, provide more middle-class jobs, and lift people out of poverty. However, this did not happen. The sentiment held by working-class Mexicans today is that NAFTA was a failure for the most part. The agreement has driven down the value of the peso, and wages and job opportunities have remained stagnant. As a result of this, many people are forced to leave their homes and come here in hopes for better opportunities and standard of living. In addition to the stagnant economy and lack of opportunity for upward mobility, working-class Mexicans are faced with violence that we simply do not have to deal with here in the United States. Drug cartels regularly target union leaders and political candidates simply for speaking out. In reality, the people who come here don't have much of a choice except to come here by any means necessary because their lives literally depend on it. In 2010, Haiti was ravaged by an earthquake that devastated the country and forced 60,000 people to come to the U.S. as refugees. Since then, Haiti has been wronged and stolen from repeatedly by the U.S. For example, the Red Cross collected over $500 million in donations for the earthquake relief after the natural disaster and only built one home with all of that money. Haiti has dealt with sanctions from foreign countries since they gained independence under Toussaint Louverture. Most notably, though, or most recently, is back in 1991, the first Bush administration imposed an embargo against Haiti, barring most trade between the two countries. Like most sanctions and embargoes imposed by the U.S., the goal of this embargo was to push for regime change for humanitarian reasons. The U.S. systematically focuses on issues like this in other countries that likely possess some sort of valuable natural resource that the capitalist class wants, in order to justify economic sanctions and military actions against them. The ruling class uses the media to highlight these countries' problems in order to gain public support while simultaneously ignoring the problems right here at home. The police kill at least 1,000 people every single year. Working class people are going homeless every day, and 1/3 of all children in the most powerful country in the world are living in poverty and going to school hungry every morning. As I previously stated, immigration is very much a black issue, and it is absolutely necessary for us to stand in solidarity with our undocumented sisters and brothers. Our struggles are not separate, but intersect on a number of levels. Not only are there black immigrants, but as immigration status has produced another form of criminality, it has contributed to mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex. A lot of these detention centers for undocumented immigrants are private for-profit facilities run by corporations. These same corporations are responsible for the passing of laws that essentially make being black in public probable cause for police harassment. As Trump continues to announce the new attacks against the undocumented community, the stock values of prison corporations like CoreCivic, formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America, or CCA, have skyrocketed. This means that somewhere there is someone making a profit off of the suffering and over-policing of black and brown communities, and lobbying for stricter laws to increase profit and consequently continue our suffering. They get to profit off of our suffering with no consequence and hide behind the letter of the law that they helped create. This is all because we live in a system that values profit over the well-being of human beings. People are only seen as valuable as how much they can produce. And a society that assesses its valuations on production is inhumane and must be completely reorganized. This system is unsustainable. We live in a world that has finite resources, and the ruling class will continue to strip the world of them as long as there is a profit to be had. This includes human lives. Our labor will continue to be exploited, and our existence will be criminalized even further as long as there is a profit from it. If we do not educate ourselves, organize, and fight, this will only just continue to get worse, and the future will become even more bleak for generations to come. This is a matter of life and death for all of us, and we need to fight for a new system now. As the struggle for black liberation has continued forward, it has developed. From slave rebellions to building entire cities during Reconstruction, and to the civil rights movement that gave birth to revolutionary organizations like the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, the successes and impacts that those revolutionary organizations have had on organizers and society as a whole cannot be put into words. The revolutionaries before us realized how essential it was to educate, organize, and build power within the working class. With the current political climate, it is imperative that we realize that we must do the same within our own communities, as well as with people from other oppressed groups and nations, in order to build the power necessary to facilitate real change and create a system that works for everyone. Socialism is that system. Capitalism is the root cause for nearly all of our struggles. We create wealth that the world has never seen before. However, people are dying because they do not have money for medicine. Homelessness continues to rise, and people are being crippled with insurmountable debt that keeps them in a cycle of poverty that forces them to work until they die. The rich, who keep our politicians in their pocket, want us to keep believing the lie that our struggles are independent of each other. But as I've stated time and time again, our struggles intersect on a number of levels. You can't fight for the liberation of one group without fighting for another. Otherwise, what are we really fighting for? We need to stand together and realize that our true oppressors is the 1%, and take back what belongs to us through multinational unity and solidarity. All power to the people.